We're almost finished with the first paragraph. We've been doing it all week. On 99. We're up to the last line before the gray box. We're praising the creator of the universe and the fact that he manages history and that he's going to bring a redemption to the Jewish people. And then it says, for his name's sake, with love. Now, these are two phrases which I think are in tension with one another. It's not obvious how to put them together. With love means he's involved. He cares. He takes responsibility. He's committed. He's invested in our lives and our conditions and our hopes and our fears and our opportunities. For his namesake makes it sound like he has a project and he created the world for the sake of realizing that project, and that's what motivates him, the project that has to be accomplished. So you get a dual picture of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relationship to us. One is involved, connected. Love would take account of every person's individual circumstances, every person's individual possibilities. It would express itself to different people in different ways. For his name's sake, sounds like, again, he has a project and he's managing the world in order to fulfill that project. These phrases are back to back because they're both true. That the Kodesh Baruch Hu relates to us in two different ways simultaneously, and some of the things that happen are because of one relationship, and some are because of another relationship. Here's an example I used a few days ago. This is a situation which has all sorts of nuances and challenges. Let's imagine a person who's a teacher in a school, and it turns out that one of his own children becomes a pupil in the class. That's very tricky because the teacher is both the teacher of the student and the father of the student. And on the one hand, it would be difficult for the teacher, who's his father, to show his son special concern, special care, above and beyond all the other students, because he's responsible for the class. On the other hand, he can't treat his son just like everyone else in the class because it's his son. That's a very tricky situation. Similarly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu relates to us in these two different ways. He uses everything in the creation as elements in a system that's supposed to arrive at a certain result, but also is involved in the fortunes, the lives, the development of each and every individual. So putting these two phrases back to back is a signal for a general quality of the way in which the prayers describe our relationship with Kodesh Baruch Hu. One is involved, connected, and one is distant. And
This relates to what?
sorry?
What does this relate to?
I'm talking about his relationship to the creation and particularly to people, because people.
HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relation to us?
Sorry, say it again?
HaKadosh Baruch Hu's relation to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a two-part creation. Maybe I'll give you another analogy which will help a little better. Let's imagine that you have a person who's a coach on a football team, and his son is also one of the players. So now, it's not just a question of let's say, a project, but he loves his son, and he wants the team to succeed. He's hired to make the team succeed. So what position should he put his son in? He also wants his son to succeed. He wants his son to have a successful year so that he becomes an experienced and respected football player. So he's got to manage two things at the same time. And we have to imagine that the Creator is also managing two things at the same time. That's what these two words. And then when something happens, something that happens might be because of the particular people involved. Something that happens might be an investment in a situation that will pay its dividends 200 years from now. And if you don't know which part of the relationship is being expressed, it'll be very difficult for you to understand. I'll just give you one little example. Now, I'll take your question. You may know, some of you may know of the problem of Sodom and Gomorrah, where God said, I'm going to destroy them, and Abraham prayed on their behalf. And he got God to agree that if there are 50 righteous people, he wouldn't destroy the city. And then he worked them down, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Even for 10, God said, I won't destroy the city. What was the end? There weren't 10 there, and the city was destroyed. So you might think, so what was the negotiation worth? So what if God agreed to 10, he knowing all the while that there aren't 10, and the city was destroyed anyway? But hundreds of years later, when the Jewish people fail, and there's a decree against them, one of the arguments that Moses makes is, if I can find 10 righteous Jews, will you spare the people? And God says yes. Where did Moses get this idea of 10? He got it from Abraham. Because, like in legal terms, you have a precedent. Here, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, yes, for 10, I will spare the group. And that being the case, hundreds of years later, that concession, so to speak, that God made with Abraham became the basis of saving the Jews in the wilderness. So that's our concept of history. Nothing happens by accident, and nothing gets lost. Everything has a place, just it may take a long time to realize the place. So if you're living it, and you see it, if you're there watching Abraham and watching the negotiations, and then you see the city destroyed, you think, well, that was just a waste of time, because it didn't do anything. It didn't do anything there, but it did something hundreds of years later. Okay, then below the gray area, which is we don't say every day.
Rabbi, in
Yeah.
Siddur, we don't have the mention of maybe you need to add it. Maybe we should add it.
No, chas v'shalom. Really, in the Sephardic city, you don't have it.
Yemenite.
A Yemenite, okay.
We have
So
the mention of,
it's true. I'm only using this particular. I mean, I don't daven Ashkenaz either, but I'm using it because that's the one that's used in the yeshiva. But I didn't know that. That's very. Now you wanted to ask a question. Okay. Okay. Now here comes the last.
Can I add it?
Sorry.
Can I add it, or I'll be breaking?
Not in the first three. No, you can add in the petitions, but you can't add in the first three. And you know, what would you say to a person who, trying to find a reference for you, you're listening to a piece by Beethoven, and he says, you know what? I think if that part were shorter, and we change the key, it would be better. What would you say? Beethoven? Don't touch Beethoven, okay? Just leave Beethoven, okay? You want to write your own stuff? Try to sell it? But, it's a free world. Don't touch Beethoven. For 200 years, people have been thrilled and were marveling over everything that Beethoven wrote. So it's not likely that you're going to come up with something that's equal to Beethoven. These texts were created by individuals and groups whose whole lives were invested in Jewish understanding and in Jewish commitment and Jewish practice. Sometimes they risked their lives for that practice. And these words came out of the depth of their understanding and their feeling and their experience. We're probably not going to do better.
How did that process actually work? 120?
Well,
120 writers together?
The 120 at the beginning of the Second Temple set the basic structure. They set a framework, but phrases were filled in for a long time after that. Even in the Talmud, you have cases where one did it this way and one did it that way. So it took a long time to squeeze, and that's one of the reasons why there are different texts. Now, this Amidah, this section that we're studying, has about 450 words. There are maybe 4 or 5 main versions. They vary to about 5% or less, 4%. So the variation is very small. Of course, every word counts, and if there's a variation of a word, you have to study it. But the basic structure is the same across the board for thousands of years now. Okay, now here, the next to the last line, O King, helper, savior, and shield. So before I get to king, let's think of these three words: helper, savior, and shield. How would you describe the difference between them? Could you make a comment on why the order is in this order? Or what do you hear when you hear these three terms: helper, savior, and shield?
Helper means you still have to do your part. I'll help if you do. A savior is you do nothing and I'll come and save you. You're in trouble already, and a shield prevents it before it happens.
Okay, I think that's basically right. Helper means I'm doing something. I can't do it on my own. But he's not offering to take the burden off my shoulders. Tell me, you go home, forget about it, I'll take care of it. No. It's a partnership. He's offering a partnership to make the success. Savior means I'm drowning. I'm gone. It's over. If you don't save me, I'll be gone. I can't do anything for myself. Have you heard the expression grasping at straws? That means the person's drowning, the straw is floating, isn't it? And he's going down. Now, if he weighs, 75 kilo, holding the straw is not going to help much. But you're going down, and the straw is floating, so you you hold on to the straw. Here you're helpless. A savior means that you're helpless, and he saves you. Shield means you don't even get into trouble. It protects you in such a way that nothing occurs to you, nothing happens to you. Okay, would there be any sense of the order here? Is the order arbitrary, or does the order of the three words communicate some idea?
Yeah, from the lowest level to the biggest.
Okay, it's from the least contribution of God to the maximum contribution that God makes. From less to greatest. Okay, now for the hardest question. Which one of them is the top prize? Which one of them is the most important of the three?
Shield.
Okay. He says shield. Anybody have
It's the most comfy.
Say again?
It's the most comfortable.
Less comfortable?
Most.
It's the most comfortable. Yes, it's the most comfortable.
Maybe
And you don't even get into trouble that way.
Right? You don't even get into trouble that way.
When it started, the problem never
Right.
started.
I think it's
Right.
first the helper.
Why?
Because if we ask the help of Hashem every time, He creates a shield for us every time, but He won't create a shield if He's not, like, the first is the most important, because it's the beginning of everything.
It's the beginning. Okay, perhaps. Let me try with the second one and see if we can get it on the same page. Savior. Why did God create us? Did God create us so that we'll be in impossible situations and He'll save us? Suppose your whole life were just God saving you. That's all there was to life. Would that be a successful life? Could that be the reason why God created us? To be drowning and pulled out, drowning and pulled out, drowning and pulled out, and that's the whole history of the human being's life? Surely that can't be the reason why He created us. Suppose the whole life was being shielded. Nothing ever happened to challenge. Nothing ever happened to threaten. So you would sit there and what? Twiddle your thumbs? Meditate. Yeah, meditate on the sound of one hand clapping. Meditate on nothing. That's a life? Helper means there's a project. There's a job to be done. You have challenges. You can succeed or fail. If you succeed, you can build on those successes. You're creating something. He created us for us to be creative, to face challenges, and to succeed, and to deal with failure when we fail. So helper is the top description here. That's what we want. If you could go through life, all of life, if it would be possible to go through life and all of life, just being helped by God, but never being in a situation where you're threatened to drown, and then being saved, and not being protected, I think you would find that life was very fruitful, very beneficial. Yes, if I'm drowning, I have to be saved, otherwise I can't continue to work on the project. Yes, there are things which, if they approach me, will crush me and being shielded enables me to continue working on the project with which he'll help me. But the purpose of it all is the project that I'm engaged in, and that's why helper is the most fundamental here. Helper for sure, that's the purpose of my existence. And savior and shield when indeed it's necessary to preserve my ability to function where he'll help me. So I think that's the meaning of the order. And I want to make one more remark about shield. I don't know whether you think about what you're shielded from because of your birth, because of your education, and because of the language you speak. For you, it's a second language. But you're not worried about where your next meal is coming from, are you? You're not worried about becoming infected by rampant disease from the sewage. You're not worried about, thank God, being overrun by enemies. A lot of people in the world don't have those protections. So you think of shield, you think about the lives that people are leading and appreciate how much you're shielded from. And even the language. The English language is the language of 3/4 of all scientific publications in the world are written in English. Half of all the world's publications are written in English. And for you, it's a native language. Everyone else on the planet has to learn it as a second language. You can't get along if you don't know English. But you were given it. You're healthy. You're educated or becoming educated. You have confidence that you'll be able to work and earn a living. You're in a very, very privileged position. And you should be thankful for that privilege. Not guilty. Not guilty. Thankful that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you these benefits because not everybody in the world has them. So these three are descriptions of what we are praising and thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for being for us in the world. Now, did I skip somebody who had a question? No? Okay. So now, then it says king. Now, every blessing is supposed to mention that God is king. Usually it's mentioned at the beginning. Here it's mentioned towards the end. King means the one who's responsible for and managing and taking concern for the condition of the people or the nation over whom he's a king. We said a few days ago that in our liturgy, we speak of God as our Father, our King. That's the title of a prayer that's said over and over again. It has at least 30 different clauses said with different vocabularies. Our Father, our King. Father is loving kindness. King is justice. Father is first. Father is fundamental. King is a role that he plays so as to interact with us as Father in the most beneficial way for us. So king here is lower than the idea of Father. Well, we said at the beginning, our God and the God of our forefathers, and we talked about the ways in which he relates to us. So all of that is already expressed above. And king is the one who is running the world, and part of his running the world is that he is a helper, savior, and shield. Okay? Now, we end the blessing, but we say, blessed are you, again, like we did at the very top. Shield of Abraham. That's a verse from the Torah, shield of Abraham. And the question that's asked is that in the beginning of the blessing, all three patriarchs are mentioned, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. At the end, only Abraham is mentioned. Why doesn't it have a phrase for each of the patriarchs? There are phrases in the Tanakh that could have been taken out for each of the other two as well. So here there's a comment in the Talmud, B'cho Mesaimim. Abraham, with you we finish the blessing. And there are several explanations of why that is. First of all, Isaac and Jacob are Abraham's descendants. Not only are they his biological descendants, but the qualities that they represent grow out of his spiritual quality. This we spoke about a few days ago. Abraham's loving kindness, one of the ways that loving kindness expresses itself is by communicating to someone else a gift that's perfect, with no flaws, no detracting features. When you give someone a gift, there may be an implication. You're needy. You can't make it on your own. You can't provide for yourself. So I'm helping you. It's not nice of me to help you. Definitely nice. But it has that implication. That's why, for many people, if someone gives you a birthday gift, the next thing you do is find out when his birthday is. Because if you gave me a gift on my birthday, I want to give you a gift on your birthday. If I don't, what does that mean? I accept being your charity sink. You're giving me this, and I'm going to use it because I need it, and you don't need or I can't give to you. There's an asymmetrical relationship. You don't want that. You don't want to be that way. So when you give a gift to someone, the ideal is to enable him in some way to earn it, so it isn't just charity. One way to do that would be to give him a job. Instead of just handing him money every week, to give him a job. So at the end of the week, when he gets his check, he says, yeah, it's very nice. This money I'm going to live on, and he's giving it to me, but I earned it. I worked for him. He owes it to me. And thereby the person has his self-respect, his honor, his self-esteem, much more so than if you just give him what's called a sinecure, just give him support for free. Well, it's the loving kindness then that's motivating the giver to provide the job rather than just money. Well, what's the job? Well, you sign a contract. You write in the contract, if you work the week, I'll give you $1,000. At the end of the week, when he comes in to get his check, I owe him the $1,000. I can't say no. That would be cheating him. He could claim it in a court. Here's the contract. Where's the payment? That means that the relationship of a job is really a justice relationship. It has built into it requirements and victimization if they're not met. It's not a gift, not a free gift. He worked, so I owe it to him. If I owe it to him, I have to pay it. So it's the loving kindness and the motivation that sets up a relationship of justice. This is how Isaac can be born from Abraham. If Abraham is loving kindness and Isaac is strict justice, and you think, but those qualities are distant from one another. In fact, they're in conflict with one another. If I give you a gift, I'm not practicing justice. If I give it to you because I owe it to you, and justice demands it, I'm not giving you a gift. That's true. But in a more subtle way, the desire to give the most perfect gift can lead a person to set up a relationship of justice. So Isaac's quality can grow out of Abraham. And then Jacob is a kind of amalgam of the two qualities, which means all of it really grows out of Abraham. So when we end the blessing with Abraham, that's really a symbol for all three, since he's the source out of which the other two grow. That's one way to understand why only Abraham is mentioned. And there's another way to understand it. This is a Hasidic twist on the words. B'chol Mesaymim, we're ending with you. Ending what? Well, in the context of the Talmud, it's ending the blessing. What about ending history? We are 200 plus years from the 6,000 year mark. So we're coming close to the end. How do we end? What quality is prominent in relating to the end and bringing about the end? Abraham, B'chol Mesaymim, with your quality of loving kindness, that's how we'll be able to prepare and provide for the end. Which means that, as Jews, we have a large variety of obligations and responsibilities, but the theme underlying them, the theme accompanying them, should be kindness in all circumstances. So I'll give you a few examples. Prayer. You have the siddur, you hopefully pray with a minyan, go to a shul, to this yeshiva, and you're praying. How do you pray? Out loud? To yourself? Sitting quietly? Standing? Pacing? There are people who pace up and down when they pray. So you say, I hear. Could be done, sometimes aloud, sometimes quietly. It depends upon my mood. Depends upon, what's going on in my life. Yes, it does depend upon that. What about its effect on everybody else? Does that play a role? Maybe you're disturbing other people with the way you're praying. Or maybe you're inspiring other people with the way you're praying. Is that on your mind? It ought to be on your mind. Because you ought to pray also with loving kindness. Pray with having in mind what the effect is on other people. I don't know how much experience you've had in yeshiva, but there's an unwritten rule. The people studying in the Beis Medrash, they're all studying the same thing, the same pages. What happens if a beginner has a question? I'm reading the text, I don't know what it means. He can stop anybody in the room and get help. That's an unwritten rule in yeshivas. No one can say no. Why? Because sitting in that room with 100 other people means that it's a group project of 100 people. And part of the reason you're there is to support the other people. So when you have that situation, your learning is a learning with loving kindness to others who need help in learning. So you go through the responsibilities that you have. In our period of time, we should be looking for the loving kindness that is in in the practice of those responsibilities, to make that an additional aspect of what we're doing. Yeah.
Rabbi, if you're going to ask too many questions, as you understand, you're just going to be kicked out of group to the lower group, and your kindness would be like, let's put this way, the whole project would be a bit less. It was the individual,
well, you're taking an extreme case, and I suppose there could be such an extreme case, but we go back to my picture of 100. How many people in the 100 are beginners? Maybe 15.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, in many yeshivas, there are people hired to stand there to answer questions. If you spend time in university, just imagine that. You don't make an appointment with the professor for 3 weeks from now and spend 20 minutes with him. There's something in the readings you don't understand. There are people hired to stand there and answer your questions. Wouldn't that be a nice thing in education?
Yeah.
You think that would sort of push the ability, the output up a notch? There are a lot of things in our educational system which would push things up a notch. So I don't think we have to worry that the whole group of 100 will be crippled by the fact that and some questions could be asked of the teacher. There's a lecture every day. So usually the deeper questions, more sophisticated, will ask the teacher, because the teacher will answer them in class and everybody else will hear the answer. Everybody will benefit from it. That's also a kind of chesed. So that's one of the ways to explain why Abraham is principle here. Okay, now we're up to the next blessing.
Rabbi, can I throw you one more Yemenite twist to see what?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Instead of Ozer Moshiach again, we say Melech Merachem Moshiach again. I'm curious how if that still fits into the.
Wow. So in the Yemenite text it says he has mercy
Merachem Moshiach
and saves. And so I could make a bridge. Let me show you something here, and I'll tell you what I asked my Rebbe Zatzal. This is Ashkenaz, so you have it before. Yeah, look on page 59. This is the opening blessing before the recital of the Psalms. Let's just start reading at the beginning. What I want is a few lines down. Blessed is he who spoke, and the world came into being. Blessed is he. Blessed is he who maintains creation. Blessed is he who speaks and does. Blessed is he who decrees and fulfills. Blessed is he who has mercy on the creatures. I'm sorry, I skipped. Blessed is he who has mercy on the earth. Blessed is the mercy on the creatures, etc., etc. So I asked my Rebbe, what does it mean that he has mercy on the earth? For creatures, you could think of animals. If you're very far left, you'll think of trees. I'm not going as far as rocks and streams, which are supposed to have rights and all the rest. But then the earth means the earth. What kind of mercy can you have on the earth? So my Rebbe answered me, everything that's created is created for a purpose. And God manages the world in such a way that it actually fulfills its purpose. And that's the mercy he has on these things. They are managed in such a way that their purpose gets fulfilled. And this is based on a very famous comment in the Midrash, the splitting of the sea. Well, it's not the nature of a sea to split. It's the nature of a sea to respond to gravity and the wind. The waves are made by the wind. And sometimes earthquakes, which create tsunamis. But to split and remain split for hours and then come back together is not the nature of the sea. So how is it engineered that the sea does that? And the Midrash says that when the sea was created, God said to it, I'm creating you on condition that when it's necessary, you'll do something that isn't common to your nature and split because I need you to split. And that's the condition I'm using to create you. Meaning, pushing the sea out of its normal function needs a preparation because things are created to function in the way that their basic qualities would have them function. So the mercy it gives them the opportunity to fulfill how they are created. Then, this merciful, if that's what it means in your text, is very close to what I said about helper. Helper means he enables me to fulfill those challenges, makes the challenges, fulfill those projects that I'm supposed to do. I can't do it alone. Here he's saying the mercy that he has on me is that he makes me able to fulfill the things that have to be done, that I have to do. So it will be very, very similar. I'd have to look at a commentary on your siddur to find out what it means in terms of your own literature, but I could make that connection with what we have. Okay, we're back up at page 99. This blessing starts with God's mightiness. We spoke about that. I'm not going to repeat that, but it emphasizes, makes central revivifier. Wow, what kind of word is that? Revivify. Look it up in your Google dictionary of the dead. The literal Hebrew is makes the dead live. Mechayeh means to give life, make life, and Mesim are dead. And the peculiar thing about this blessing, before I go through the whole text, is here in this line you have this reviving the dead. Turn the page. 101. The top line of the large print has revivifies the dead, but releases. Third line, maintains his faith to those who sleep in the dust, who is like you, causes death and restores life, and you are faithful to revivify the dead. Blessed are you, Hashem, who revivifies the dead. Now, as you will get used to Jewish sources, this is extraordinarily unique. 5 times in one small paragraph, you have the same phrase. I don't know if there's any other piece of Jewish literature that's so short and has the same thing 5 times. It's very, very unusual. And we have to ask what that means. Now, when they put a capital R on revivify, they're probably making reference to the resurrection, which will happen at the end of this period of history. The dead will come back to life. Soul and body will be rejoined. That's a single astronomical event. I'm not astronomical, but astronomically great. and an outstanding event, but it still doesn't justify saying it 5 times. So there is an explanation here which I think helps a lot. If I remember correctly, I saw it in Gevurah. This is a book on the meaning of prayer. It was like 900 years old. Why am I alive now? Well, I could say, listen, I was alive yesterday and nothing killed me in between. That's why I'm alive now. That's not the Jewish view. Life isn't a matter of inertia. You just were that way and you stay that way until something interferes. No, life is a constant gift. Kadosh Baruch Hu is supplying life constantly. It's like an appliance being plugged into the wall. If it's not plugged into the wall, it won't do anything. Oh, thank you very much. So, if I think of what I am, what am I in and of myself? I'm dead. I'm like the appliance not plugged into the wall. The appliance not plugged into the wall is dead. It has to have electricity, otherwise it doesn't work. So you can understand making the dead live as a constant process of maintaining life rather than the one event at the end of history when all the dead will come back to life. And indeed, the phraseology would lead to that because it's reviving the dead 5 times, and once it says, maintains his faith, but those who sleep in the dust. That's resurrection. Those who sleep in the dust are those who have died already, and for them he's going to provide resurrection. But all the other ones don't have to mean that. They could mean this constant process. And then you can think a bit about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu does this. Elements of physics, elements of chemistry, elements of earth science, elements of the food chain. For example, maybe you know, when is water at its most dense? At what temperature?
From 0 to 100.
So the natural thing is to say where it freezes. That's its most dense. But it isn't true. Water is most dense at 4 degrees centigrade.
Wow.
And as it gets colder, it gets lighter.
Yeah, it expands.
So that the colder water doesn't sink because it's more dense. It floats up to the surface. Suppose it weren't that way. What would happen? Well, the air is like minus 20 degrees centigrade. Now you've got this pool of water. The water that's in contact with the air is the top layer. If the top layer goes down to 0 degrees, and that's its most dense, it's going to sink to the bottom. Then the next top layer will sink. You'll start having ice from the bottom up. The thing will freeze solid. Everything will die. Oh, but chemistry isn't like that. It isn't like that. What happens is that when it gets colder and colder, it goes to the top. And the lower part is warmer. And then when the ice forms, it expands. So it expands upwards because liquids are incompressible. And you get an air layer in between. So you have the ice with an air layer to protect the rest of the water from the very cold air above. And that's why the fish can live all winter. Otherwise they'd be dead. Wow. Chemistry. Chemistry of water. Without that, we'd be in serious trouble.
It's the exception, right, Rabbi?
I'm sorry?
It's the exception. It's the
I
only
don't
thing
know
you-
if any other liquid has that property. I'm not sure. Of course, it's not easy to freeze them either. And try freezing oil. Then, I'm going to say something which might be controversial to you. My only excuse for saying is that it's true. As Rav Desta points out, there's more than enough of everything. More than enough air, more than enough land, more than enough food. There's more than enough of everything. Some of it is due to human ingenuity implemented, but of course for us, human ingenuity is an accident. If you look at the literature of the doomsday predictions from the climate societies, the world ended in 1975. The world ended in 1990. The world ended in 2000. The world ended in 2013. Over and over again it ended because it couldn't continue. 20 years before, they said by that time it's going to be over. Paul Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Explosion, made concrete predictions, all of which came out wrong, created a second edition and with more predictions, which came out wrong, and he was Obama's head of his scientific advisors. I guess getting the predictions wrong doesn't matter in science, or some sciences, some of the time. There's more than enough of everything. Why? What's the message in that? So Rav Dessler said, one message is, if you don't have everything you need, it's not because God ran out of supplies. It's because the providence that's running the world decreed that for you, this is how much you should have. Otherwise, you could think of it as a kind of zero-sum game. If he gets the cake, then I don't get a cake because there aren't enough cakes to go around. No, it's chosen that way. Then there's the cooperation between human societies and the levels of cooperation that exist. Division of labor, which eventually in the 19th century created the factory-type process of producing a product where you could have 100 people working on the same product, but you could turn out 1,000 products a month. That increased the productivity of human societies gigantically. So all these things are ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu manages the world so as to provide for our survival. So when we say the words Mechaya Mesim, wouldn't be wrong to stop for a few seconds and just think of all the different ways in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides this ability. One last thing I'll mention, the people who are predicting doom, it's because they've discovered something that's dangerous and they have ways to take care of it, the ozone layer. If the ozone layer had gone beyond its limit 100 years ago, no one would have known what was happening. And nothing could have been done about it. Now it's getting dangerous. There's a lot, but we have the chemistry and the physics and the instrumentation to detect it, and we have ways to divert it. So it seems like the dangers arise, but they only arise at a time when we can handle them. That's also a matter of divine providence. Otherwise, we could have been wiped out.
Man, that's crazy.
Isn't it? Isn't it? So I'll tell you one more, since that one made an impression. I think here, sitting in Israel, if you think about Israeli history, the state of Israel, and even before that, we are surrounded by Arab nations. These Arab nations have tensions with one another. Sometimes they fight wars. The two big dividing points among the Arab nations is rich and poor. Some of them have oil and some don't. And then there's Sunni and Shiite. Iran and Iraq fought a very bitter war 20 years ago. They used poison gas, among other things. Just for the record, at that time, the population of Iran was 45 million, and the population of Iraq was 17 million. And they fought to a standstill. Just a little history of Iran. Okay? So now, they disagree about their political systems, they disagree about their monetary systems, and they disagree about their religion. But there's one thing they agree on, without any question whatsoever. Jews don't belong here. That they agree on. If they could ever get together, all of them, and cooperate on making a war against Israel, there's no natural way that we could survive. You're talking about 200 million people? There's no way we could survive. But they can't. They can't agree even on that. I think that's a bit of divine providence, which keeps them at such odds with one another, they can't even agree on the things they agree about, which they would all celebrate if it was accomplished. That's one of the ways in which the state of Israel, HaKadosh Baruch Hu manages that the state of Israel should remain in existence. So when you stretch your mind a little bit and think about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu manages the world, this Mechaya Mesim can be spread over a lot of our experience. You got a question? Was there any question? No? Okay. Yeah.
Yom Kippur War,
Yeah.
like Egypt was united, partially united with Syria, and Jordan even joined us, I think, at some point. but that I maybe missed. I mean, like, we already had precedent where the Arabs united to kill us, but because they were not so united as they seem, or it's not like it never worked out.
Yeah, but you're not thinking of Iran and Iraq and they didn't, and Lebanon, they didn't participate. So it wasn't everybody. Iran and Iraq are big, and they do have armies. They didn't send soldiers there. Yeah.
I don't remember where it says that someone that is doing a lot of averot, someone who is Rasha, is called as someone dead. So also like this, the Hashem
You know français.
Wow.
Hashem that is
That-
making the
What a nice thought. I never thought of that. That's a very interesting remark. The Gemara says, Rishoim b'chayehem kruyim mesim. The wicked, even when they're physically alive, are called dead. That means they're spiritually dead in some sense, right? Now he says, but they're being kept physically alive, aren't they? They're walking and talking and eating and drinking, right? Functioning. So that's another way to read, God makes live those who are dead. These people who are spiritually dead are still being made alive by God. That's a very...
There's some there's some averot that make some parts of the neshama go away, and only the part that we need to survive is staying.
That's another thing. Okay, that's a Kabbalistic thing. That's going a little further than I'm going in these classes. But I think that's a very nice. And now let's just ask, why would God do that? If they are wicked, why would God keep them alive? And the simple answer is, the fact that they are wicked doesn't mean that they will be wicked. There's always a way back. There's always a way back. So looking at them now and asking why God continues to give them life now, you simply can say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu either wants to give them a chance to take a way back, or they play some role in the functioning of the whole project, like we said a half hour ago, which even though doesn't justify their particular existence, it's something which justifies their place that they play in the whole. By the way, there are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and there are many explanations for why there are 2 days. Rav Tesla says one explanation is this: on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you're judged according to your own record. What did you do? What didn't you do? How well did you do it? What temptations did you have? And so forth and so on. The second day, you're judged on the basis of how many people need you, how many people rely on you. And it could be that you get a favorable judgment because of the second day, but not because of the first day. So this means that there are these two points of view. There's you as an individual, and there's your role in the overall project, and they're evaluated. Both are evaluated, and they both contribute to the overall way in which he manages your life. But I think that's a nice thought of saying that makes the. Now, I have one more thing to say here. On 101, at the very top of the page, who sustains the living with kindness. The previous blessing had kindness in it also. Kindness. What does he do? Revives the dead, supports the fallen, heals the sick, releases the bound, those who are locked up. What question leaps to your mind when he says that he deals with the world with kindness because he supports the fallen, heals the sick, and frees the bound? What question leaps to your mind?
Why does he make them sick?
I mean, why did they fall? Why are they sick? Why are they locked up? Why wasn't his kindness that he would be a shield? Why wasn't his kindness that he should prevent those things from happening? So, a few days ago, we talked about blessings in disguise. We said in the first blessing where it says, the first blessing here, the first bracha, it says, chasadim tovim, good loving kindnesses. And we said there, it's a loving kindness where you can see right away that it's a loving kindness. You have to wait 5 years to see the consequences. Here, we're being told that going through the process of falling and being raised up has a function. Going through the process of being sick and being healed has a function. Going through the process of being bound and being freed has a process. But here, you don't always see it. So here you have the idea of loving kindnesses which aren't good in the sense of being open and obvious. It's a different kind of kindness. And for many people, this is a very large portion of their lives. People face challenges. People are under stress. People have worries. That's natural and normal. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts you out of the worry or lifts you out of the stress, that's a way of his catching your attention, so to speak. If every morning breakfast is delivered on a tray, after the 16th morning, you won't even say thank you anymore. You just take it for granted. When you go through stress and you're saved from the stress, then you appreciate that there's something there that wants your good and wants to protect you. That's why Mogain, the shield we said before, requires a real active imagination. I'll just tell you, we had the editor of the Jerusalem Post down here 40 years ago, was interviewing students. Why are you here? So there were a lot of American students, there were some Israeli students. The American students said, I was in college, and I took this course, or I went to a summer camp, or whatever. The Israeli student said, I was in Lebanon, and I knew the next bullet might have my name on it. And I asked myself, what am I doing here? I thought to myself, no American can say that, or almost no American can say that. You were never afraid you're going to die in the next minute. But he was. And that's what pushed him to think, what am I doing here? I'm an Israeli. There are tens of thousands of Israelis in Los Angeles. I could be in Los Angeles. What am I doing in Lebanon with them shooting at me? And that forced him to come to grips with who he is and why he is. That's something which lifts him out of a difficult situation, but he's a different person afterwards. I'll tell you one more. No, I'll skip that. Okay, so that's the idea of these three. And then, ultimately, is maintains his faith with those asleep in the dust, resurrection, about which I will say one thing and then I will be finished. Why is resurrection important? What's the idea behind resurrection? The idea, one of the ideas. So the Talmud has a parable. A man had an orchard and he noticed that fruit was missing. So he decided to make an investigation. He came across two people whom he thought were suspects. He said to them, I think you're stealing my fruit. And they said, look again, pay closer attention. This one of us is blind, and this one is crippled. The blind person can't see the fruit, and the crippled person can't get the fruit. The owner of the orchard said, I know how you did it. The blind one picked up the cripple and put him on his shoulders, and then the cripple, who could see, told the blind one where to walk. And that's how you stole the fruit. Okay, you live a lifetime, and you have a history left behind. Now, who is responsible for that history? Imagine there are transgressions in the history. And the judge comes and says to the soul, why did you do that? The soul says, me? I did it? I only love the good and the right and the true and the beautiful and the holy. Certainly I didn't do it. Judge comes to the body. Why did you do that? Body says, me? I have no executive power. I don't make decisions. I'm just a tool in the hands of the soul. So the soul can't do it, and the body can't do it. That's right. It's the soul and the body that together that can do it. That's why you have to have a resurrection to recreate the agent that performed the actions. Otherwise, you're not dealing with the agent. Dealing with the soul without the body, you're not dealing with the agent. That's why a final judgment requires the recreation of the agent that performed the actions, which you are going to judge and evaluate. Some take this even further and say that it goes into the world to come. that the soul and body together go into the world to come for eternity. Yes, there are changes and transformations, right? It's not identical to the way it is here, but the soul and body both go. Not everybody agrees to that. Maimonides in particular doesn't agree to that. Maimonides says only the soul goes. That's a fundamental difference of opinion, though it has to be measured and described appropriately. But the resurrection as a prior stage is necessary, otherwise you're not judging the agent that did that. So when it says here, he keeps his faith with those who sleep in the dust, that's what it's referring to, the resurrection. Okay? Have a wonderful Shabbos.